This is your daily dose of all things royal. So, sore loser Harry just can't seem to let this go. So, not too long ago, Prince Harry and Baroness Lawrence have dropped their statement after the High Court threw out every single one of their claims against the Daily Mail. All dismissed, and instead of accepting it, they've gone straight into the usual routine of playing victim. Just released, they write, "We came to court seeking justice and accountability, but we have received neither. This judgment represents a complete reversal of the position which previous judges have taken in relation to the hacking claims successfully brought against both News Group newspapers and Mirror Group newspapers, who were represented by, at the time, the judge who made this decision. Generic findings about various private investigators that were held by the courts in these parallel claims to have carried out unlawful activity at the very same time in relation to similar stories, and well-known individuals have been wholly ignored. The fact that this court has chosen to dismiss them represents an inconsistency which is hard to understand or reconcile with common sense or the evidence heard in the courtroom itself. It is a complete and obvious whitewash, but sadly not altogether unexpected. However, the lengths to which the court has gone to exonerate the Mail is as shocking as it is totally unwarranted. When the court says there is not sufficient evidence of wrongdoing, despite the documents showing otherwise, then one does wonder how justice was ever going to be achieved. One need not look past when a private investigator the Mail used actually admitted on tape to having unlawfully blagged Baroness Lawrence, or when a journalist recorded the name of the private investigators she used to find out about highly sensitive medical information that even the Mail was too worried to publish, or when another private investigator emailed one of the journalists with the actual British Airways seat number and ticketing details for a young girl simply visiting her boyfriend in return for payment. It feels here like one rule for the newspapers and another for the claimants. While the claimants presented evidence, Mail journalists simply gave denials, and the court chose, uncritically, to believe them, even in the face of inconsistencies, contradictions, and blatant untruths that were obvious to neutral observers in court when compared to the documents. We presented to the court evidence which we believed was compelling at the time and remains so now. We would like to thank our legal team for all their hard work and all the witnesses who were brave enough to come forward in the pursuit of justice." I've got lots to say about this statement. Let's start over from the beginning. They say, "We came to court seeking justice and accountability, but we have received neither." No, what you received was a full trial, months of hearings, disclosure fights, witness after witness, and hogging up the media cycle, including Harry with your bullshit, and a 436-page judgment that actually did the work. Justice isn't getting the result your legal team and PR operation told you was coming, okay? Justice is the judge looking at the evidence and saying it wasn't proved. That's what happened here, Harry, whether you like it or not. Prince Harry and Baroness Lawrence claims that this judgment represents a complete reversal of the position which previous judges have taken in relation to the hacking claims successfully brought against both News Group newspapers and Mirror Group newspapers. All right, so here's the problem with this line. Those were different newspapers, in case you didn't get that. Different evidence, different witnesses, and in some cases, actual admissions and phone hacking convictions. You don't get to win this case by saying, "Well, we won against someone else, so we should win against Associated too." The judge wasn't bound by what happened in the other trials. They're completely separate. So the logic here seems absolutely manipulative. He had to decide this one on the evidence that was put in front of him, not evidence from other cases. Like, what are you, stupid? Then they go on to complain that generic findings about various private investigators that were held by the courts in those parallel other claims to have carried out unlawful activity at the same time in relation to the similar stories and well-known individuals were ignored. No, they weren't. The court looked at them and said they don't automatically prove what Harry needed to prove here. You still had to connect the dots to these specific articles that were mentioned and these specific claimants. Generic, quote unquote, everyone was doing it. Findings from other cases don't fill in the gaps when the actual evidence in the trial didn't get him over the line to what he was trying to do. Like, he really did think that the other cases, because he won them, is going to translate over into this one when they were completely separate. They had nothing to do with one another. Then to go on to say that this was a complete whitewash, dismissing the fact that he didn't prove his claims, shows how petulant he is, just like how petulant he was when he lost a security case and called it a good old-fashioned stitch-up. Wait for it, folks. The narratives are going to start coming fast and furious about how the crown was against Prince Harry, right? This is a judge who sat there through this whole entire thing, wasted so much time, but still managed to go through every single article that he complained about. When you look at this 436-page judgment, this judge analyzed the missing documents, the third-party investigator evidence, the limitation arguments, the quote-unquote Leveson lies allegations. I mean, he looked at everything and still concluded the claims failed. That's not exoneration. That's a detailed rejection because the proof wasn't there to require the standard. All right? But you see, Harry is betting on the public being too stupid to understand this and thus put out this very manipulative statement. And what Harry is doing now is putting a target on this judge's back for making the wrong choice. They then go on to say in this paragraph, when the court says there is not sufficient evidence of wrongdoing, despite the document showing otherwise, then one does wonder how justice was ever going to be achieved. This is the bit they really wanted to land. The idea that the documents clearly proved wrongdoing, but the judge somehow ignored them or bent over backwards to protect the mail? I mean, it's a deliberate distortion of what actually happened in this judgment. Like, I just can't stand how everything that Harry and Meghan do is so deceptive and manipulative. It's like downright dirty. The judge did not say the document showed wrongdoing and then just ignored it. He went through the available documentary record in detail, 436 pages worth. He looked at what was missing, why it was missing, and what could properly be inferred from the gaps. There is an entire section on missing documents, categories and significance, and another on the incomplete documentary record. He broke it down into categories of potentially significant missing material, and he literally examined how those gaps should affect the court's ask, and it just simply wasn't there. The bizarre thing here was that what the claimant's lawyers wanted was for the judge to treat the absence of certain documents as proof of wrongdoing itself. So they wanted the judge to make the assumption that there was this wrongdoing going on, and the court refused to do that. Like, that's the justice system. You need to have evidence. You can't just go off of feelings. In this judgment, they make it a point to dedicate a section on alternative lawful explanations, public domain, conventional sourcing, and the limits of negative inference. The judge made clear that you cannot just point to a gap in the paperwork and say, therefore, it must have been unlawful. Journalists gave explanations for how stories were sourced. Those explanations had to be weighed against the documents that did exist and the evidence as a whole. In this case, the court did do all of that weighing and concluded the documents did not prove what the claimants needed them to prove on the balance of probabilities, going off of a feeling. This wasn't the judge shielding or protecting anyone. This was the judge refusing to let these people win by saying, we can't find the document that would have cleared them, therefore, they must be guilty. Maybe this was a tactic that David Sherborne used in past cases that got settled out of court, but this time around, it just didn't work. I'm glad to see that this is not how serious allegations work in a UK courtroom. The burden was on Prince Harry and the other claimants to prove unlawful information gathering, and they failed to do that. I think the last 2 years that this case has been ongoing, we all saw the fuckery going on. I think we all knew from the beginning that this case was going to go nowhere and that this was likely done because they thought it was probably going to be something that was going to get settled out of court. But what they did here with this particular case was that they tried to fill the holes with inference because they didn't have the evidence to support it. And the overall picture with what happened at the other newspapers. And the judge said no. He wanted them to provide positive evidence that tied it to the articles that were referenced that these claimants brought forward. And on that standard, the documents that they put did not get them to where they needed to be for the judge to say, okay, you're right, you win. They can sit there and claim the documents showed otherwise all they want. But the judge who actually read them heard the explanations for why certain things were missing and applied the correct legal tests on inferences and negative evidence, and he came to a different conclusion. And it really doesn't matter if Harry is pissed off and thinks that it was biased. This was the law that was applied fairly and justly. Now, this line I felt absolutely breathtaking, where they're claiming it feels here like one rule for the newspapers and another for the claimants, while the claimants presented evidence which we believe was compelling at the time and remains so now. To be Harry, you could believe your evidence was compelling all you like. The court heard it, they tested it, and they weren't compelled. That's the difference between this press statement given to your propagandist, Chris Shipp, and what was going on in the courtroom. The belief isn't proof. Your opinion isn't proof. And after years of litigation, the millions in costs, and every procedural advantage, the evidence still didn't get you there. So it doesn't matter that you are Prince of the UK. Doesn't matter that you have money. They didn't have a case here. And I do believe that they really thought that the Daily Mail was going to buckle and settle out of court. This statement isn't really about the judgment at all. It's about whining and throwing a temper tantrum and refusing to accept that this case collapsed under the proper scrutiny it deserved. I don't think anybody should be surprised by the statement because we've seen Harry do this before. When Harry doesn't get what he wants, he always has to put out there of how unfair the system is, or possibly going to blame his father because these are his courts and he could have stepped in. There's never any type of accountability as to just maybe this case didn't have any legs to stand on. And I think we all saw that as this was going on. Harry, being who Harry is throwing a tantrum because he didn't get what he wanted. And today, him showing up at Invictus to give his little speech, he does look like he's seething inside, but I don't feel sorry for him one bit. The only people that win in this situation are the lawyers. David Sherborne doesn't care that he lost, he's still going to get paid. The court gave Harry every chance. The judgment is what it is, and no amount of spinning it as a whitewash changes the fact that every single claim was dismissed. Sometimes the story isn't that justice failed you. Sometimes you just didn't prove your case, and you lost. And it's no one's fault but your own. This whole exercise that Harry went through with Hugh Grant, Doreen Lawrence, Elton John, Elizabeth Hurley, and the others was all about trying to get Rupert Murdoch canceled. Again, this goes back to this incessant need to control the narrative, to control the press, to control free speech. And good for the Daily Mail after this verdict came out and called it what it was.
4 years ago, lawyers for Prince Harry, Doreen Lawrence and Elton John accused the Mail, in a blaze of publicity, of placing bugs in homes, cars, cafes and landline phones. We described those charges, some related to stories that were over 30 years old, as lurid and preposterous. Today, in what was a momentous victory for the Mail, the High Court dismissed every single one of the 97 claims. That is an overwhelming vindication of our journalism. The Mail's famous front page, naming 5 thugs as Stephen Lawrence's murderers, could have seen me jailed for contempt of court. Instead, it triggered the Macpherson inquiry and the eventual jailing of 2 of the killers. Stephen's father, Neville, says he owes the Mail everything. Why Baroness Lawrence for whom we have always had profound respect and sympathy, chose to turn on both the paper and the brilliant reporter who campaigned for justice for her son for over 2 decades, is something I will never be able to comprehend. Prince Harry wrote a sad book which boasted about his killing of 25 Taliban, his drug taking, and, in cringe-making detail, how he lost his virginity. There isn't a laundry in the cosmos big enough to wash all the dirty linen he has aired about his own family. For him to complain about his privacy being invaded takes not just the biscuit, but the whole tin. Poor Harry. I feel sorry for the way a confused and angry young man has been drawn into this case. The bitter irony is that his mother, Diana, liked the Mail. We were her paper. We took her side in her acrimonious breakup with Charles. She and I would speak and meet. The Mail's superb royal reporter was her friend and confidant. The truth is that this trumped-up action, which has cost well over £50 million and wasted a huge amount of valuable court time, should never have been brought to trial. That it did raises profoundly disturbing questions about the conduct of elements of the legal profession. Today's verdict is not just a victory for Associated's magnificent journalists, several of whom have had a terrible toll imposed on their health and lives, but a free press generally. Make no mistake, this was a conspiracy supported by Hacked Off to destroy a paper, financed by the orgy-loving racist Max Mosley and involving the actor Hugh Grant. It was also a sinister bid to resuscitate Leveson II and impose statutory regulation on the press, which, even now, is rearing its ugly head in Labour's media green paper. Some of the allegations made by Harry's lawyers against the Mail involved Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. They were rejected by the court. But remember, it was the power of the Mail's journalism that not once, but twice, resulted in Mandelson being sacked as a minister. And it was the Mail on Sunday's exclusive picture of Prince Andrew with his arm around 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre in Ghislaine Maxwell's home that ultimately resulted in justice for Epstein's underage victims. Such justice only happened, as with Stephen Lawrence, because of the actions of a free press.
Harry arrived today at Chatham House, and although he tried to put a smile on his face, you could tell that he was seething.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to all our supporters.
Now, there's one thing that I want to say before I go. Chris Shipp is reporting today that Harry's security team had to ask the Met Police to help police the crowds. Well, there's really no crowd standing there. Probably they'll rent a crowd to make it look like they're crowds. But doesn't Harry get security anyway if he gives 28-day notice? I'm pretty sure that security is included in this little package per the Sandringham agreement. So what Chris Shipp is reporting here is really to make people feel bad that Harry is not getting any kind of support. But in actuality, that's a lie. Harry does get support for any time he goes back to the UK. So why is this guy reporting this? Yeah, I'm so sick and tired of all of this manipulation and propaganda that these people keep putting out. And they do it because, one, I guess the clicks, and two, it's to stay on the inside. But who really cares about these people anymore? I know I don't. I just want to see Harry pay for what he has been doing here in the United States. Like, all of this stuff is nonsense. Now that we understand how Harry and Meghan have weaponized the media and manipulate the public, who's to say that they didn't pay for crowds to be there to make it look like Harry has some sort of popularity? Look how pathetic this crowd is. And all of this headache that Harry was making about getting taxpayer-funded security, for what? It's embarrassing, and it just shows how far this guy has fallen. And if his people surrounding him gave a rat's ass about him, they would tell him, just stop, chill out for a little bit. Maybe it's not the best approach, but no, they continue to keep making him look like a fool. Now, I know there was a lot of back and forth on whether Meghan was going to show up. She definitely ain't showing up now. I mean, when have we ever seen Meghan be by Harry's side whenever he's facing backlash or having a bad day? Almost never, right? There's no way that Meghan's going to show up now. The only thing that's sad about this is that it was Meghan that put Harry up to pursue this case, and she's not even there to be by his side during the most humiliating loss, I think, in a while. Anyway, I don't feel sorry one bit. You made your bed, now lie in it. And that's all I got to say, but what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a fraud.